lot of people I have conversations with are much more open now than 10 years ago. I would have died rather than sort of talked about something like Christianity. And I thought people that did so would like, ew, it's like they're so square, daddy-o.
Well, we've never had that problem.
Right, yes.
Probably other way, to be honest.
Other way.
A lot of Muslims wear their religion on their sleeve, so it's probably the opposite direction. But it is, I think, I notice what you're saying. There is a bit of an awakening when it comes to our relationship with spirituality and with faith. And I think it's a really good thing. Because the alternative, as I had this conversation with Jan Jakelek on the American Thought Leader podcast, the alternative, and we studied this because from our Islamist background, we studied a lot of communist ideology because at the time, the Soviets had invaded Afghanistan. My family's from Pakistan and there was a war going on. The Islamists that we were part of were attempting to expel the Soviets from Afghanistan because of their occupation of Afghanistan. That country, sadly, has been in constant war and conflict for over 40 years, which is most of our lives, right? Most of my life, I don't know.
Yeah. I'm not that much older than you.
So we grew up really, really having kind of an understanding of what communism, intellectually, what communism was. And we used to teach it. As Islamists, we'd sit there in Pakistan, in various cities. I'd sit there with 10, 20 people around me, talking to them about the intellectual flaws and dangers of communism. I was 21 years old. So this has been ingrained in us, this generation, from early on. And the reason I mention communism is because on the one end, we talked about faith. On the other, absent that, what tends to happen is the state fills the void and wants to become God or the higher power.
Yeah.
Instead of, so why do communist powers, governments, regimes, why do they have such a problem with religion? Whether you look at China and their treatment of the Falun Gong, their treatment of Christians and their treatment of Uyghur Muslims, or you look to the Soviet Union and the treatment of the Chechens. I've got a lot of time for Chechens, by the way, because like the Afghans and like the Christians in China and the Falun Gong and the Uyghur Muslims in China, the Chechens had to suffer that before all of this under Stalin. He purged a lot of them, and they suffered really, really harshly under communist rule because they're traditional Muslims, and they're actually traditional Sufi Muslims. So communist regimes always had a problem, and we know how how the Soviet Union treated the Russian church, and they always had a problem with religion. And I think one of the main reasons for that is because what religion does in communist regimes is it provides an alternative moral hierarchy that doesn't require the state for its moral reasoning, that exists outside of the state. Yeah? And the state sees that as threatening because if you have an alternative moral hierarchy, whether you stick to it or not, the fact you believe in it is what, for the state, matters. Because then when they come along and try and sell you theirs, again, it's not about behavior at this stage, it's about belief. If they try and sell you that they have the ability to determine morality based upon materialist doctrine and the needs and the time that the people require in that need, in that time, they're going to find, the state is going to find, a fierce resistance to the idea that materialism defines morality, mainly from religious communities. So they have a big problem with that. And I think one of the key antidotes against increasing authoritarianism and state power, I believe in a small government. I don't want big government, right? One of the key antidotes to this, and it's a problem here for us in Britain, even though we don't have communism, it's a problem in America. Biden has just appointed a disinformation czar under the Department for Homeland Security. That's the department that's responsible for catching terrorists. And now they've got a disinformation czar. Somebody, by the way, that reminds me a lot of Professor Umbridge in the Harry Potter books, but that's another story. But if you end up in that situation where you've got a state that's deciding that they can decide what true and false is, which is what this disinformation czar is, they get to decide what's good for you and bad for you. And then if you try and challenge that, it's called disinformation. If you remember in Canada, when there was the pastor that was repeatedly arrested.
Yeah?
It was, and if you look to, I don't even need to go much further, look to the reaction of mosques and Muslim communities in Britain. They've tended, generally, if you look at ethnic minority stats, to be skeptical of vaccine mandates and all that stuff. Yeah? So the religious communities began pushing back because they're used to questioning state authority because they have a higher authority that they're accountable. That's what large states don't like. It's why communism wants to destroy religion, and it's why I believe it's a great thing to keep faith alive.